Greetings to everyone. We are the Group 1 and we will discuss analysis of concept.
Analysis of concepts. Analysis of concepts provides knowledge of basic concepts and principles of critical thinking. Without the mastery of these concepts, it would be impossible for anyone to critically think. Thus, the bundle of these concepts would serve as a foundation to further understand the advanced and more complicated techniques. Now, words and concepts. It is essential to understand the distinction between a word and a concept, and this would help one's understanding of many complex concepts in philosophy of language and informal knowledge. So, a word is the most basic form of communication, and without words, concepts cannot be formed. Example, according to the module, without words, ideas cannot be formed, and without ideas, concepts cannot be formed, and without concepts, knowledge cannot be asserted, and without knowledge, there would be no arguments. So, simple example, tayo, as a baby, as a toddler, we start learning words such as mama and papa, but we still don't have recognition. So, alam lang natin yung salitang mama at papa, pero wala tayong ideas kung sino ba si mama at papa. Pero as we grow older, kaya na nagka-aral na tayo ng idea kung sino si mama at papa, nagka-aral na tayo ng concepts kung ano ba ang role ni mama at papa sa atin, nagka-aral tayo ng knowledge about them, and without knowledge, there will be no arguments. Okay? So next, how are concepts formed? According to John Locke, all existing things in this world are particulars. So, raise your hand. So, each part of your hand is a particular. Yung linya, yung dugo, kahit ano pa yan. Now, name every part of your hand. I bet you can do it. Thus, your whole hand is still a hand, since it is already a general term for you. And it is impossible for an individual to name its hand. And it is also impossible for the hand to have a name for its every particular. Practically, in particulars, general terms are used. Locke called this process abstraction, when the particular has similar characteristics which forms a general idea. Next, we have intension and extension of concepts, which will provide an understanding of the difference between intension and extension. Having the knowledge of its distinction will improve one's analysis of its concept terms. Extension and intention. Philosophers of language have agreed that every term expressing a concept can be analyzed from two aspects. An individual can identify things that are included in the main domain of the concept, called extension of the concept, specifying traits, characteristics, set of traits, or the function shared by members is called intention of the concept. So, example, the intention of ship as a substantive is a vehicle for conveyance on the water, and its extension embraces such things as cargo ships, passenger ships, battleships, and sailing ships. And essential property is when the intention becomes very precise and clearly defined. It means that the possession of a single trait is the necessary and sufficient condition to qualify one to be a member of the extension of a concept. An example, according to the module, is the concept of mammals. The requirement for the membership is the possession of a single trait called mammary glands, and without it, an animal cannot be called or cannot be a mammal. Essentialism states that if there is no essential property held in common by all the members, then the concept cannot be meaningful. Next, we have games and family resemblance. When we start looking and seeing at the games, we will not find an essential property held in common by all activities we call games. According to Wittgenstein, we will only discover a complicated network, similarities overlapping and crisscrossing, sometimes overall similarities and sometimes similarities of detail. Wittgenstein could not find a single essence to characterize all games, but he discovered a multifarious relationship, and the intention of the concept games forms a family, characteristics, and a function. He discovered that family traits, characteristics, and functions rather than essential property.
Now that we have discussed words and concepts, We know that words is the most basic form of communication. But do you know that in philosophies, there's also such thing as miscommunication between our philosophers? Well, how did this happen? Simply because they are not using the same words in the same way. So to avoid the useless controversies, we must make sure that we are using the same language. And in using the same language, meaning ensuring that we are having a common understanding of what the word means. And the philosophers agree that the meaning of the words varies depending on which verbal community an individual belongs to, either orally or in written form. And if you're going to ask Wittgenstein on his stand about this, his answer is the meaning of the words lies in its use in the language. And to give a precise clarification about this, about his theory of meaning, he meant the actual uses of language or words by real people in actual linguistic context, which means he opposed the use of artificial language, which, according to his judgment, philosophers are fond of doing. For instances, words like substance, ideas, and absolutes are artificially used by philosophers in their language game. But according to Wittgenstein, they have no form of life and unplayable by real people in real life situations. Because according to him, same combination of letters can be used in different ways, hence having different meaning. Just like the word cold, it could mean the weather or simply the disposition of someone you love. And for this reason, there is a cardinal rule in philosophy, and this is to never take part in any discussion or verbal dispute unless you are sure that you are using the same word in the same way. Now let's proceed to the classification of concepts. The first one is empirical concepts, which is the easiest one to explain and to understand. The members of the extension of a concept should be observed in the world, and that of tangible and visible to the unaided senses, which means that they must be observed to exist in space and time using our senses. The next one is the theoretical concept. So, these entities cannot be readily observed to exist in space and time using our unaided senses, and only observable through the use of very powerful extending sensory devices like the electron microscopes. This is necessary for a scientific theory to be functional and to generate research. For instance, we're using radio telescope for macro-universe and microscope for micro-universe. The next type of concept is dispositional concept. This is a hybrid concept that came from the sciences. For instance, temperature, elastic, and magnetic. They do not designate a directly observable trait or characteristics unless certain operations are performed. For example, for us to know if the entity is magnetic, we will put iron or metal around it. The next one is analytic. These concepts are neither tangible nor visible and cannot be found in the world. The extension of its members are not empirical, meaning cannot be observed using our senses. And these entities are conceptual, mainly created by our minds. For example, are the numbers and circles. They cannot be found in the world. They are not tangible nor visible using our senses, and they are conceptual entities made by our minds. So the next one is evaluative concept. This generated so much controversy because it covers a whole range of concepts such as moral, aesthetic, and religious concepts. For instance, good or bad, right or wrong, beauty and ugliness. So this is our judgment of value or worth of a person, act, behavior, place, or event. And the next one is fictitious concept. This concept is the member of the extension of a concept are purely imaginary. So it means they are not real. And the last concept is metaphysical concept. This concept assumed the center stage in many philosophical systems. So substance like God, mind, and matter are as an example of this type of concept. So for instance, the intention of concept mind, it's fundamental and immaterial, has no mass, has no weight, and cannot be located in space, yet it is believed to exist in time. And it is invisible and cannot be divided into parts, and this is eternal. It cannot be destroyed unless it is destroyed by God. This is intangible, but it's believed to interact with our body. So that is the metaphysical concept. So to test whether these entities really belong to this concept or not, we have this what we call intersubjectivity test. So it is a quick but reliable method in determining the types of concept. It involves oneself and another person's observation towards an entity to identify what kind of concept it is. So, for example, if I believe this entity is empirical because I can see it and I can touch it whenever I want to or whenever I want to observe it. So, it passed the intrasubjectivity test. It's empirical for me. But if another person want to see or to touch this entity but he cannot do or if he failed to do so, then this means this entity is not really empirical because it failed the intersubjectivity test. So for an entity to prove whether it's empirical or that it belongs to whatever concept it is, it needs to pass the intra and intersubjectivity test. Of course, it varies on what kind of concept you are trying to look for. For example, if it's analytical or abstract, or if it's theoretical, the other person that should be involved in intersubjectivity test should be an expert to that field. So that's how we test it. That's how we test to identify the classification or type of concepts that we have.
For the last 2 minutes of our discussion, I encourage everyone to answer only one of the provided questions. And please put it in the comment section below. First, give an example of an intention and extension. Second, how would you differentiate words and concepts? Third, what are examples of essential properties? Fourth, what is empirical concept?